The polar vortex isn't a storm, but a vast area of low pressure and frigid air swirling high above the Arctic. In winter, it forms a barrier that keeps the coldest air locked in the Arctic, but when the vortex weakens, Arctic air escapes south, unleashing extreme cold and dramatic winter weather. The polar vortex's Achilles heel lies high above us, in the stratosphere. Sometimes, a sudden stratospheric warming, an SSW, erupts, sending temperatures in the stratosphere soaring by up to 50 degrees Celsius in just days. This warming isn't felt on the ground, but its effects ripple downward, disrupting the vortex. The cause? Planetary waves, generated by mountains or temperature contrasts, surge upward and break in the stratosphere, dumping energy and heating the air. This can slow or even reverse the polar vortex's winds, throwing its stable spin into chaos. The vortex stretches, distorts, and can even split into smaller, wandering vortices. These fragments are no longer anchored to the pole, they drift south, dragging Arctic air with them. After an SSW, it can take days or weeks for the chaos to reach the surface, but meteorologists watch for these signs as a warning of extreme cold ahead. In late January 2026, this exact scenario began to unfold, setting the stage for a brutal winter in Europe. The stratosphere's sudden heat wave was about to rewrite the continent's weather. SSWs are rare, but when they strike, they can unleash some of the most severe cold outbreaks in living memory. Europe was about to experience one firsthand. By January 2026, scientists saw the polar vortex was already unstable, stretched and oval, not its usual tight circle. Powerful planetary waves battered it, and then a major sudden stratospheric warming hit, sending stratospheric temperatures soaring. The vortex began to split, breaking into two lobes, one over Siberia, the other over northern Canada. The atmospheric fence was gone. Arctic air was free to spill south. This is what meteorologists call a polar vortex collapse. Not a disappearance, but a breakdown of its organized structure. The jet stream below, which steers our weather, buckled and meandered, creating new pathways for cold air to surge south. For Europe, the split was ominous. The Siberian lobe, aimed directly at the continent, a massive high-pressure block formed over the Atlantic and Scandinavia, shutting out mild air and opening a direct channel for Siberian cold. The stage was set for an Arctic invasion. The normal west-to-east flow was overpowered. Now, the coldest air on Earth was heading straight for Europe. The continent braced for a winter unlike any in recent memory. The vortex's collapse was about to become a continental crisis. Europe's deep freeze was about to begin. February 2026 arrived, and the polar vortex collapse became reality on the ground. The first wave of cold hit Scandinavia and Eastern Europe, while Western Europe was briefly shielded by Atlantic low pressure. But soon, a powerful blocking high rerouted the weather map. And the beast from the east, a relentless frigid wind from Siberia, swept across the continent. Temperatures plunged far below normal, with daytime highs stuck well below freezing, and nights dropping to punishing lows. The cold was relentless, expanding west into France and the UK, and south into Italy and the Balkans, bringing rare, heavy snow. Major cities from Berlin to Paris were locked in a deep freeze, with temperatures not seen in decades. The displaced vortex lobe parked over northern Europe, feeding a continuous flow of Siberian air. The sun, low in the sky, offered little relief, and snow piled up, disrupting daily life. This was no ordinary cold snap. It was a fundamental shift in Europe's winter. The continent was transformed into a frozen landscape, and the true test of resilience was just beginning. The Arctic invasion had arrived, and it wasn't leaving soon. The prolonged cold quickly overwhelmed Europe's infrastructure. Power grids strained as heating demand soared, with emergency alerts warning of possible blackouts. Transportation ground to a halt, roads iced over, Trains froze, airports shut down, supply chains broke, leaving communities without food, medicine, or essentials. Inside homes, pipes burst and water mains cracked, leaving neighborhoods without water. Emergency services were stretched to the limit, responding to calls for help in freezing conditions. Governments declared states of emergency, unlocking funds and deploying military aid for snow clearing and transport. Public buildings became emergency shelters for those without heat or power. Europe was no longer just battling bad weather. It was facing a full-blown humanitarian crisis. The continent's resilience was being tested as never before. As calamity set in, governments launched urgent campaigns. Stay home, stay warm, stay safe. Warnings about hypothermia and frostbite dominated the news, and people were urged to check on vulnerable neighbors. Communities rallied, volunteers delivered groceries, shared generators, and helped fix burst pipes. Social media became a lifeline for local coordination and support. Energy conservation was critical. Everyone was asked to lower thermostats and avoid peak electricity use. These small actions, multiplied across millions, helped prevent catastrophic blackouts. Emergency services and military units worked around the clock, clearing roads and delivering supplies. The response was a testament to social solidarity and resilience. The goal was simple: survive the unprecedented cold and keep as many people safe as possible. Europe's deep freeze became a story of both hardship and community strength. While Europe froze, North America's experience was more complex. One lobe of the split vortex brought Arctic air to Canada and the U.S. Midwest, unleashing winter storms and dangerous cold. But a tropical weather system, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, built a high-pressure shield over the eastern U.S., blocking the worst of the cold. As a result, the East enjoyed a brief spring-like thaw, while the West and Western Canada endured unseasonable cold and heavy snow. The continent was split: warmth in the East, deep freeze in the West. This clash showed that a polar vortex collapse doesn't produce uniform results. The outcome depends on how the vortex interacts with other atmospheric patterns. For North America, tropical interference provided a temporary shield. For Europe, with a direct path from Siberia, there was no escape. The same atmospheric event produced two very different winters. The Great Freeze of 2026 was a wake-up call about the power of the polar vortex. It proved that events high in the stratosphere can have devastating impacts on the ground. Monitoring the vortex now allows scientists to forecast extreme cold weeks in advance, giving time to prepare. But the crisis exposed how vulnerable our infrastructure is. Power grids, transport, and water systems all buckled under the strain. The lesson: we must invest in resilience, upgrading grids, winterizing transport, and improving building insulation. The event also showed that climate change means more volatility, not just warming. A less stable vortex could make extreme cold snaps more frequent or severe, even as the planet warms overall. Understanding these connections is vital for planning and safety. Knowledge is our best defense. Better science means better forecasts and better preparation. The winter of 2026 reminded us that we live under a dynamic, sometimes violent atmosphere. Learning its rules is essential for our future. Europe's historic freeze in February 2026 was the result of a wounded polar vortex. A breakdown, not a freak storm. The chain reaction from the stratosphere to the ground showed how interconnected our planet's systems are. The crisis revealed both the fragility of our infrastructure and the resilience of our communities. Ordinary people and emergency services rose to the challenge, supporting each other through hardship. North America's contrasting experience proved that the outcome of a vortex collapse depends on many factors. Each event teaches us more, helping refine forecasts and save lives in the future. The polar vortex isn't an enemy, but a force we must learn to live with as its behavior grows more erratic. Investing in science, infrastructure, and community resilience is essential preparation for the extremes ahead. The Great Freeze was a signal from the top of the world. We must be ready for whatever comes next.